Welcome to the Singularity Syndicate podcast, where we bring together leaders, researchers, innovators, and intellectuals to discuss transformative technologies shaping our future. I'm Najah Faisal. Joining me today is Eric Eden, founder of workverse.com and a CMO for over 25 years. He's also the remarkable marketing podcast host. So I'm very thrilled to have you on the show, Eric.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's start with a quick background on your journey as a marketer.
Absolutely. So as my daughters like to tell everybody, you should know that I'm very old. In fact, I'm older than the internet. I'm older than Google. And I have a different perspective on AI because I've been part of the tech revolution from the very beginning, since the 1990s, the dot-com boom. And so I've seen it evolve in a very interesting way, and I've adopted it all the way along. And there's a good argument for what pieces of machine learning and AI started long ago, or long before OpenAI and ChatGPT made it so popular. And so my first job right out of college was at Network Solutions. The original .com domain registry was my first job out of college. And I remember the interesting thing about this job was, this is like in 1995, and I was working there, and it was actually a government contract with the National Science Foundation. And they just kept saying, this whole internet thing, it's going to level off. It's going to level off. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. And so, it's just very interesting from the very beginning with the internet. People really weren't that confident in it. And then I went into website hosting and e-commerce for businesses during the second half of the dot-com boom. And I worked for a company that rolled up 53 internet companies. And I was in charge of some sales and marketing teams there. And our job was to sell 10,000 e-commerce websites. And so I had all these salespeople who were like calling every business, and they're saying, you need to get a website for your company. And the business owners would be like, why do I need a website for my company? That's stupid. Like, no one's ever going to do that. And I was just like listening to these calls, and I was like, oh, this is so hard. And we're like, well, you need a website so that like you offer your products online and people can pay with a credit card. And people are like, oh, that's dumb. No one's ever going to buy anything on the internet with a credit card. That's stupid. It's just helpful to know that this is where this journey started, right? And then I went into, SaaS software, which is a logical evolution because you have website domain names, you have website hosting and e-commerce, and then you have applications on top of those. And it was so hard to get people to think about software on the web, like not installing, software on their computer. And you think about floppy disks and USB drives. And I was trying to think the other day, when was the last year that I actually installed software from a USB drive or some kind of disk onto my computer? I mean, it's been like so many years, I don't even remember. But like, this was a foreign concept, like in 2005, right? And I'm a guy who then bought the first iPhone in 2007. I stood in line for it. And I've had every 15 versions of the iPhone since then. I've had iPads, I've been the MacBook guy. And it's just very interesting because Apple's whole argument is they've embedded AI in everything they've done from the beginning, right? And, then we had sort of social media that was filled by algorithms that started in the early 2000s and evolved. And then you have companies like Apple and Amazon that would argue that they were very early on in the AI because they started things like Siri and Alexa, right? And they can argue that that was an early attempt at it, and then it just wasn't as good as ChatGPT, right? And fast forwarding to just a little bit more recent, when I was working with tech companies in Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area, even in the last 5 years before OpenAI and ChatGPT, like in 2019, let's call it, I remember I was like looking at the GPT version 2.0 that was included and this is like in 2020 maybe, that was included in Grammarly and some of these tools. And me and my marketing teams tried to use this, and we're like, this is crap. Like, we can't use this. Like, it wasn't like there's some problems with it, like there is with ChatGPT. We're like, ChatGPT will get you like, 60, 70% of the way there. GPT 2.0 got you like 20% of the way there. And it was almost more work to like fix what it did than it was to create it from scratch. So as we're on like, 4.0, and you're thinking, okay, well, what is like 7.0 going to look like? I just think it's very fascinating when I look at it from my lens of being a really old man, as my daughters like to say. It's been very interesting to watch this journey and how all along the way people have been naysayers of it, of technology, and the underlying technology of machine learning and AI really hasn't been a phenomenon of the last year. It's been something that people have been building for more than a decade.
So when it comes to marketing, since the ChatGPT was released and then DALL-E and Midjourney start to become really good at generating images, and now we've got Sora, which hasn't been released yet, but perhaps soon. How is that going to change the marketing landscape and our role as marketers?
So I think there's some specific things. For example, in my career, the first 20 years of my career, when I was doing marketing campaigns, it was characterized by spending thousands and thousands of dollars on stock photos from places like Getty Images and iStock Photo. And the hardest thing about that was it was just really expensive. It's hundreds of dollars per image. I think creators and photographers should be paid for their work, but the prices were really, really steep, which made it sort of ripe for something like, Dolly and Midjourney to come along, because it was such a price gouging sort of scenario in my mind. So there's a whole battle going on there about those companies who don't want to lose that revenue, but a lot of marketers are now just like, if I can get exactly what I want with image prompts, why wouldn't I do that? And the food images you can create in Midjourney look good enough to eat. I mean, you can, with the right direction, you can generate some really, really good stuff. So like stock photography is an example of, a way that's massively disrupted, a certain segment of the creative process, in marketing. I think there's issues there around copyrights, of course, and things like that that'll need to be worked out before it'll be used at scale. So that's one area. Another area, to answer your question, is so many jobs were created in the past because there wasn't an automated way to do it. So when people say AI is coming for jobs, it's not really AI. It's just a more automated way of doing things that makes a lot more sense. And so I've worked at companies where hundreds of jobs were created that never should have been created. They were only created because management sat around and said, hey, we have this big sort of data entry sort of project. There's no automated computing system way to do this that doesn't cost us millions of dollars of development up front. So let's just hire an army of people to do it manually. And that really is not great because it wasn't rewarding for those people, and it wasn't that great for the companies in terms of a cost basis. So just saying that AI is coming for people's jobs, it's really, companies need to rethink how they are creating jobs and what jobs should really be jobs. Jobs should be created that help people develop skills and help people develop in their career, not just our jobs because a company needed to create some project and they didn't want to invest in the IT or computing automation to do it. That's not AI's fault that AI is good at doing those automations, right? So I think that that's actually the disruption that's happening. It's not AI. It's the fact that companies created so many bad jobs that should never have been created, that should never have been jobs. Does that make sense?
So yes, I mean, I'm struggling though, to take a position on this, because I know a lot of people, because I worked in the advertising industry for a long time, and they're really genuine artists. They really love their craft, either in photography or filmmaking, and they have honed their skills for a long time, and they provide real value. And now AI got trained on all of their content to become this kind of like stealing their styles and their hard work to bring about same or superior level outputs from their work. And I could definitely see their frustration. And now they have to reinvent their profession. And what do they do? I mean, personally, I'm going through that process of reinventing myself after a long career in the Middle East, in Dubai. And then I moved to the US, and now I'm building everything from scratch. It is a frustrating process of reinvention and reskilling and upskilling and all of that stuff. Do you think that, for example, a graphic designer should not exist in the first place as a job?
So I'm empathetic to people who lose work. Don't get me wrong there. Of course, I'm empathetic to that. But I think that if you take one of the examples you gave is people who create films, they should take the skills they have as a person who can give amazing direction and just leverage the new tool set to do that, right? Like, I think that there's certain jobs, like people who created films, that can be rock stars and can be 10x what they've been with the power of the tools behind them. I think the same could be true for graphic designers, right? I'm sure a graphic designer could give better direction to Midjourney on how to create images than I can, because you can do things like in the prompts, like you can even put in the camera settings of an exact camera and the light and the aperture and all these things that people or designers would be or photographers would be much more equipped to say, this is the exact settings for this picture. And they could probably describe the picture in a way much better than I ever could. And the way that I've cheated, and this is a great hack, is I trained ChatGPT to be a Midjourney prompt generator. And I fed it directions of how to create Midjourney prompts. And I'm like, you are a Midjourney prompt generator. Generate a prompt to create this kind of picture. And then it would write out the 5 paragraphs for Midjourney of the image for me. But still, even with that hack, I think a photographer or a graphic designer can give Midjourney better prompts than I can, or even the ChatGPT could, pretending to be a Midjourney prompt generator. So I think the answer to your question is there's still a role for people. They just have to be open to change and to shifting. And change is always hard, right? I mean, but the reality is you can't unring the bell. And this technology is happening. It's like when the internet was launched, it's like some people were against the internet being used for commercial purposes. And I just laughed and I was like, we're not the Red Cross. This is going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely the case. I mean, I receive comments on my videos all the time from people who are saying, "Oh, AI is the devil" and whatnot, and I always respond that, what can you do about it? Like, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to adapt or like be left behind. So what are some use cases that you are implementing? I'm using a lot of GPTs. Like, I uploaded a bunch of data to a certain GPT, and this GPT's task is to do that. So I have a lot of these GPTs that help me a lot to automate a lot of my work. I'm also doing a lot of automation with Zapier to help me like streamline some processes. What are some use cases that you are using when it comes to these tools?
I think there's a lot of great GPTs that are being created that are there in the ChatGPT store. I think that having specific GPTs can get you much closer to the result that you need. And some of the ones that I've used is there are specific ones for writing certain types of content that are just better at getting you to the results you want. They'll first create an outline for you, and then they'll walk you through creating the outline, and you approve it piece by piece. So they break down bigger projects into smaller pieces so that the AI can accomplish it in a better way. That's like an example of what a great GPT does. And then there's other aspects of it, like workflow automation. So even if you're getting a great result from AI, for you to have to manually cut and paste it into another place is tedious when you're trying to do things at scale. And so things like Zapier are great for that. And I just saw this stuff is moving so fast, like we've been talking about. At the Adobe Summit this week, Adobe announced their new Gen Studio. And I'll just note that like a lot of what they're creating for marketing campaigns is workflows and generating content so that you can create the workflow for an entire campaigns and the all the way through to the analytics. And so a lot of that is still a dream. They're still building it, but you can see where this is going.
Yeah, you host a remarkable marketing podcast, and I recently saw a software that a friend of mine have developed. And what this software does is it takes your website, analyzes the main key points, and then it looks at your analytics, your target audience, whatever, and then it starts generating articles, blog posts, images, and podcasts, and it will publish them all like in one piece. And then you can do that on scale, so you could keep producing all of this stuff optimized on specific keywords that you want to optimize on. And also, like, do you think that as a podcaster, as a human podcaster, are we going to be irrelevant very, very quickly?
I think that it's going to be harder for people to stand out. So I think that that's the key. I don't think the key is volume. I think the key is you have to have a good quantity, but you also have to do things that really stand out and are different. And I think people have a big problem doing that in general. I mean, I think people have a big problem from a marketing perspective of just describing who they are and what they do and why they do it, like on their website to people. So if people have a foundational issue with that, then I think the question is when it's more competitive, for lack of a better word, because there's so much out there that'll be created by AI. If you can't stand out, that's where the rub is really going to come. But I think there's one thing that is also distinguishes AI generated content from human generated content is AI can scour the internet and they can give you the facts from anything that's online. And so just regurgitating that is not actually adding very much value. But what does add value is when humans can share real life stories and anecdotes that personalize the content, because AI can't really do that in the same quality way, right? They can tell a story, but they probably can't tell as realistic of a story or as emotional of a story. Maybe one day, maybe with version 7 of GPT, we'll see, right?
Speaking of version 7, I often ask this question to my guests. On which camp are you? Are you on the camp that says that AI is going to keep on an exponential curve of intelligence? It's going to keep getting way better to reaching a point where it's literally going to achieve a human level, and we will have AGI very soon. On the other side, there are some other people who say, AGI is not going to happen perhaps in the coming 20, maybe 50 years. Because we often underestimate the power of what we have between our shoulders. It's an incredible machine that, yes, maybe AI could mimic a little bit of what we do, what our brains do, but what we as humans capable of is so much more than a generative or predictive text or predictive word or predictive image or whatever. Where you sit on that scale?
So I'm probably somewhere in the middle, because I don't think it's going to be 20 to 50 years, but I don't think it's going to be next year. So I'm probably somewhere in the middle, but I hearken back. I don't know if any of your listeners are Star Trek fans, but the Star Trek, The Next Generation, I thought this is fascinating. 35 years ago, predicted this wave of AI because they actually had the character on the show, Data, which was a actual human AI driven life being that looked very human. And the whole genesis of that character that Brent Spinner played very wonderfully was that he struggled with the dynamic of being both an AI data, living robot and human emotion and not being able to feel love and not being able to understand humor and, not being able to fully understand it. And it was always just funny things about him trying to make jokes and experience love. And, I think that it's just fascinating to me that 35 years ago on that show, they were exploring that. So talk about, predicting the future, of where we are today. So, and that, guys, maybe it takes longer, but it's also fair to say people have been working towards that for 35 years already.
Which one is your favorite AI movie?
Well, I think back to some of the very earliest old school ones, like war games, like Would You Like to Play a Game? 2001 Space Odyssey. Don't touch that, Dave. There's so many good ones when you think back to it.
You know what I'm watching right now?
Which one?
I'm watching Westworld. It's a series.
Oh yeah,
It's so
incredible. I love that one. I love that one. But one more that's just for the history books was the one with weird science, where it starts with the two geeks creating a virtual AI girlfriend, because that's been the big controversy this year, that people creating girlfriend GPTs. We've come full circle.
Absolutely. Crazy. Eric, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And what I always like to say, especially when it comes to AI, it should never be easy, but it should always be fun.
Awesome. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for listening.